Hey guys, Comp Bros here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Xbox Idea Xbox program. Ignore Final Fantasy X. I'm just whatever. Decided to play some Final Fantasy X. Um. Okay, so the Idea Xbox program, for those who don't know, is the program that allows developers to self-publish on the Xbox One platform. And it rolled out recently. You can sign up for it. I don't know if the actual program is out yet, but it essentially gives developers free dev kits and the Unity engine to work with if they so choose to, as long as they follow the policies of the program. But the policies is the big problem here. And it all sounds well and good, but there are a few things that just stand out, and it's atrocious for gamers, developers, and pretty much anybody that's not Microsoft. Okay, so there's 3 to 4 main points. I'm only going to talk about the main two I care about. I may get to the third, may get to the fourth. Developers can only self-publish on the Xbox One if they follow these guidelines, these rules. They have to release their game at the same time as other platforms. So if they were to develop for the PS4 or Wii U right now and it's finished, they have to wait until an Xbox One version is developed to release them all at the same time, or they have to release on the Xbox before anywhere else. Which means if they can only develop for one platform at a time, it can only be for the Xbox One. Now, the reason they don't just say, no, I'm going to release on the PS4 and then later on the Xbox One is if you don't follow these policies, this policy, these guidelines, then you simply cannot release any games on the Xbox One. You can't upload any of your games. You can't put them on Xbox Live. So for any indie developer, you're cutting out a huge amount of a user base. Now, I see a lot of people saying that if the Xbox One user base may not be that much more than the PS4s or even less, that doesn't really matter because even, let's say by March, April, May, the Xbox One has 3 million units sold. Let's say even a third of that is multi-plat adapters, which means they have a PC for their indie games or a PS4 or a Wii U or a combination of all along with their Xbox One. So you're still talking about 2 million people that only have an Xbox One for their indie titles. Let's say even 1% of that, 20,000 people would buy this game. That's what, 200 to 300,000 $10 to $15 game. That is a considerable amount for an indie developer. And you're completely cutting out that share if you can't release it on the Xbox. And you can't release it on the Xbox unless you follow this policy, which is you release it first on the Xbox One, or you release it at the same time as everywhere else. This presents a huge problem for developers because if they have a game out now, they're not seeing any revenue for that finished game. They just have to sit on it until an Xbox One version is available. If they've had a PS4 dev kit for 8 months and they've been developing this whole time and they finished it, Wii U version is finished, PC version is finished, they have to completely sit on it until the Xbox One version is finished so everything is released at the same time. If they can, again, I say, if they can only develop for one console at a time, one platform at a time, it has to be an Xbox One, or they simply can never develop or put it on the Xbox One. If you don't follow these guidelines, you cannot put your game on the Xbox One. And that they can't buy dev kits and not follow this policy. This is the only way to put games on Xbox Live for the Xbox One right now. It's to use Idea Xbox. If this works, If Xbox sees a large amount of timed exclusives, and they very well may, they very well may, because right now there are dozens of developers already signed up for this. So Xbox, while not putting in any extra money for these developers, while doing nothing significant like Sony and Nintendo have been doing for developers all this time for these indie developers, they're simply strong-arming their way into the business, and they're completely holding developers back from putting out the game that they could put out right now, or potentially put out. I see a lot of people on forums, NeoGAF, in IGN and stuff like this, on Twitter, Facebook, saying that this is fine because it's usually Xbox people, and they say, isn't this the nature of the beast when it comes to console wars? One console is getting a large amount of exclusives through, by giving out free dev kits, Unity, Engine, what have you. No, it's not the same thing. This is a terrible practice. Because unlike if Microsoft were to buy these studios or publish the games themselves or do something like that, that's completely different. They put their own money in. They want it exclusive to their platform. That's what's happening with Titanfall. They put the money in. They say, hey, we want this exclusive. It's an exclusive. If you put out these restrictive policies and they work, others will follow suit. If Microsoft does this and the policy works, they get 40 timed exclusives over the year, then Sony will follow suit. Possibly Steam. I don't see Nintendo following suit because they don't really have a strong user base right now. So I don't see any way they could muscle their way in. But Sony and Steam could really just follow suit and say, hey, this is our policy now. If you want to put it on the PS4, you have to do this. If you want to put it on Steam, you have to do this. This means we could potentially see one indie title per system, or per platform, I should say. You're going to get something on the Xbox One, somebody working on something for this PS4, and developers get screwed over from a potentially larger user base. And I see a lot of people saying, oh, they have a choice, they could just not be. But that's a lot of people, that's a lot of eyeballs, that's a lot of money being left on the table because this terrible, you can't use that as an excuse. The choice is put it on there, put it on Xbox One, or never put it on Xbox One. Put it on Xbox One first, or at the same time, or never. Those are your choices. That's not a choice. I don't see how anyone could see that as a choice. Like, these developers are these are not huge studios. They're getting completely screwed over because Microsoft, it didn't want to self-publish to begin with, and now that they do, they want to have all these restrictive rules just so their competition can't get any type of leg up. That's just simply strong-arming and hurting the little guy. How can you build a trust with developers when you have things like that in place? How can gamers think this is a good idea, that this is just business, that this is just a business world when it comes to these consoles? To completely screw over someone and the potential they have to make money on your platform because you don't want your competitors to have a game a few months before you, or at all before you, without you doing anything extra for those developers. Again, it's fine if you're doing something for the extra for the developers. Don't give me these free dev kits because Sony and Nintendo do the same thing. Don't give me this free Unity engine because Nintendo does the same thing. Microsoft is doing nothing special for anybody. All they're saying is you can't put it on our platform unless we get it first, or you release it all at the same time. Otherwise, you're locked out forever. One developer. Okay, this is the third policy. If you had a previous exclusivity deal, you could still publish on the Xbox One. One developer I can't remember who it was at this time. They put out a game, and they tried to get into the ID at Xbox, and they were denied because they put the game out on the PS3, PS4, Wii U, and PC first. Or I think it was just the Sony platform. And they said if they had signed an exclusivity deal with Sony, that they would have been accepted, because the third policy says you can have a previous deal like that and you can still put it on our platform. Because ID at Xbox was just recently announced. So they didn't sign that deal, but because it was already out on the other platform, they couldn't be in the program. So they don't get their dev kits. They don't get the Unity engine because they didn't sign any type of deal, and because they had their game out early on other platforms. I don't know what can be done about this. If devs are not speaking up, some people need to talk about this. I really wish some devs would speak out against this, but it doesn't look like it's gonna happen. The best thing I can say is just support developers that are against this policy, because you can't even vote with your wallet on developers that do come out to the Xbox One, because if they come out to the Xbox One first and you don't buy it there, that's just taking money from them. That's just taking money from the developers, and that means that money that they were going to see from the Xbox One sales that they could have possibly ported over to the other platform, they can't port over because they don't have the money for it. So it's forever an Xbox One exclusive. If it has its simultaneous release, I would say, I don't even know if I can say don't buy it on Xbox One, because again, it's just money from the devs that just isn't if you can buy it on another platform, buy it somewhere other than Xbox One. Because this policy is awful. You can't have this. If people are so against crap like you know why microtransactions are still a big thing? You know why DLC is a big thing? Because people buy it. Because people buy that stuff. If people are buying $120 cars in Gran Turismo 6 and Forza 5 or Forza 4, whatever, which one it is, if people are buying that, why stop? Why stop doing it? If people are content with having their games have less content, the ending isn't real, it's actually DLC, another 10 of your dollars, please. If people are content with that, why stop? And if people are content with limiting developers so that they can't get any revenue from an already finished product, or they're forced to come to our place first or never, potentially taking away more money for them, if it works, why stop? If it works, there's nothing to be done. Don't let it work. I don't know how. I honestly have no solution. I just want people to know about it. I think that's it. I don't think there's much more I can say about this. Just support the devs, I guess.